Jamaal, thanks for taking some time here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Everybody wants to know who Jamaal Glenn is.
Who Jamaal Glenn is? I am an MBA 1. I'm from the Mountain West, born and raised in Denver, Colorado. Went to undergrad in the Midwest, University of Missouri, and since then have had some pretty varied experiences. Spent 3 years as an investment banker in New York City at JP Morgan, then decided to go out on my own and start a business. Started a small business publishing, of all things, political news on the internet, aggregated political news for a couple of years. So I think I have a very interesting set of experiences that I think are well suited for the presidency. I think of all the candidates, I'm the only one who's ever created a job. I've created a handful of jobs. I'm the only one who's ever made a payroll. And at the same time, during the financial crisis of 2008, I was in Park Avenue on a derivatives trading floor. So I have a very intimate understanding of a lot of different aspects of the economy. And so I think I bring a fresh perspective as an MBA 1. I'm not a GSB insider, and so I bring some new ideas. And I'm just excited about the race and happy to be here.
So you're an insider-outsider. I think some of your critics would say that as an MBA 1, that you have an uphill battle given, the lack of familiarity. How do you plan to overcome that?
So I'm really working on a grassroots campaign. Clearly, as an MBA 1, I'm not as well known. I haven't had the year to get to know the majority of the voters. At the same time, I do have some strong relationships among constituents and, reaching out to those people. And I think at the end of the day, while we like to think elections are popularity contests, I think I trust my classmates to really make voting decisions based on ideas and experience and really who can be the best simulation president. And I would put my record up against any of the other candidates. I would put my knowledge base, my ability to work across party lines and work with different sides of all the issues. And so I think at the end of the day, my classmates will vote based on ideas and values and not just who they know.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that record. All the other candidates have posted their voting records on the shared website, but yours is not on there. So how can a voter compare your record?
So one, I've been doing a lot of individual reaching out. So a lot of our classmates I've spoken to and talked about my past record and my ideas. Also, my campaign will be releasing voting records and kind of an official platform within the simulation.
What are you trying to hide, I guess, is what I'm really trying to ask.
I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm very much an open book. However, I believe in retail politics.
Where's the book?
The book is out there. Instead of some of the other campaigns may afford the opportunity to do kind of big, splashy, high cost outreaches. I'm very much a retail politician. I'm meeting one-on-one. I'm shaking hands, and I'm sharing my ideas person to person, individually, understanding their concerns. And it's easy to go out and put out a platform, right? What's more difficult is to go out and understand what the class wants. What do individuals want, and then what are my ideas, and how can we meet and then come up with solutions?
Okay, so let's talk about those ideas then. How would you describe your fiscal policy stance?
I would consider myself, I hate to categorize things in terms of right or left. I like to think
let's go wrong or right.
I'm absolutely right. Of course, I think my policies and my ideas are 100% right. I'm a believer in what I consider efficient government, not small government. I think the idea, when people hear small government, they think of kind of this super strong libertarian streak and getting rid of social safety nets and no government involvement. I'm about efficient government, a clear understanding of what government does better than the private sector, what private sector does better than government, and trying to find that right balance. I'm a big believer in no bailout policies. I'm a big believer in tax cuts, allowing the private sector, the American entrepreneur, to create jobs, to create growth. A lot of the dialogue about deficits is concerned about where can we cut. I think the largest input into cutting these deficits is growth. And how do you unleash growth? I think you allow that kind of American spirit, the American entrepreneur, capitalism, people to take money and take risks, create jobs, things like that. So I'm absolutely in for tax cuts. I'm for efficient use of government funds. At the end of the day, I am also about social safety nets, but doing it in an efficient, kind of effective way, not across the board blanket based on policies or put in place when conditions have changed. So I'm about updating social safety nets, reforming them in ways that allow everyone to share the pain, and ways that I think ultimately put our country in the right track.
Was Iraq a mistake?
Absolutely, Iraq was a mistake. In hindsight, especially, one of my big positions is that we need to update our view on foreign policy, right? Instead of kind of always fighting the last war, looking at our military as an extension of imperial power and wanting to, occupy nations. I think, we've gone from fighting enemies that were clearly nation states where you fight them with tanks and soldiers on the ground to fighting, enemies that are much more ideological, that are disparate, that are small groups of people all over the country. And so I think part of my fiscal policy plan is understanding how to fight our enemies in the future. And so that doesn't mean spending billions and billions of dollars having troops on the ground fighting countries when our enemies are, hidden out all in different parts all over the world, in some cases probably here, trying to fight us here. So I think.
So you're saying don't spend billions of dollars on making big armies, just spend billions of dollars on big bombs so we can just kill them all.
No, I mean, I think you need to have a bunch of different options at your disposal. Ultimately, my idea of the military is much smaller than kind of where we currently see things, but I think a lot of it is information, intelligence, targeted elite groups of military going after specific terrorist cells in different parts of the world. Under my administration, the government will be smaller. The growth of military will be smaller, and the growth of military will be much smaller. And I think that's not just an ideological thing. I want smaller government for the sake of smaller government. It's a lot about understanding the realities of the way we fight wars these days.
Could you name sort of what's your take on healthcare? And it's obviously a big portion of the budget. What are we doing right and what are we doing wrong?
So I think one of the primary things we're doing wrong is we're not really addressing cost, right? One of the things I do like about Obamacare is that it's interesting because we do change very incrementally in this country. We don't do kind of sweeping change. The first thing we need to attack is cost, right? And so I think we're 17th in the world in terms of healthcare results, but we spend we're number one in spending GDP per capita. So I think cost is the number one thing. The debate is focused a lot on making sure everyone is covered and kind of reforming insurance and taking out some of the impediments or taking out some of the kind of structural problems that we have in the way people interact with their insurance companies. I think all those things are very important, but at the end of the day, you need to work on cost. The majority of healthcare costs are spent kind of in the last 6 months of someone's life or once they've already had disease. I'd like to focus more resources and really unleash the power of the private sector to come up with resources for people to make better decisions earlier in life so that we can not have people reach the disease point where we spend a lot of the cost. So cost is the number one thing we're doing wrong. What I do like is that the debate has focused on making sure everyone is covered. Insurance reform is very big, but at the end of the day, I think cost is the primary concern. That's the number one thing. That's the biggest thing that's going to have the effect on deficits. That's the biggest thing that's going to have an effect on kind of our ranking on that list of healthcare performance.
So what could you drill down into that a little deeper? So you say cost. So what is going to reduce the cost of healthcare?
So I think one thing is technology. I think if you look at any sector of the economy that's experienced some dramatic technological innovations in the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, healthcare has missed out almost completely. So using data and information technology, the way people interact with their doctors, using web platforms so people can track information and make better lifestyle decisions and make better food and better food decisions, exercise decisions. I think a lot of those things get you to a point where you have a healthier patient when they go to see the doctor, and thus you get rid of those costs that are incurred once the patient is already sick, or in many situations once the patient is already terminal. All
right, so let's talk about taxes for a minute. What do you think the right level of taxation should be in terms of, you have a debate across income lines. Where do you fall in on, what the rich should pay? Should you break it up by sort of income levels? Should everybody pay a similar rate? How do you think about all that?
I absolutely think you should have a progressive tax system. However, I am a big believer in fundamental reform in the tax code, going through eliminating a lot of those loopholes, if not all of them, like the vast majority of them, and lowering the rates for everyone. So I was a big fan of Simpson-Bowles, kind of across the board loophole reform, lowering the tax rates. I'm a fan of lowering things like dividend and capital gains tax rates. I think not only does it make our tax code a little more transparent and clear, I think the government oftentimes tries to pick winners and losers, and I think, if you look at mortgage interest deduction, right, I think that sort of government policies towards favoring debt are a lot of what led to the financial crisis, right? There's a lot of tax benefits to holding debt across the board, whether you're a corporation, whether you're an individual, and that sort of institutional backing of debt, I think, creates unintended consequences. At the same time, I think there's a lot of economic activity devoted to tax avoidance, right? We have multi-billion-dollar companies whose sole purpose is to help you understand your taxes. I frankly don't think it should be that complicated a process to where I need to hire a firm, understand my taxes. I think at the end of the day, we should have lower rates, still some progressiveness to them, but eliminate a lot of loopholes. And I think by eliminating the loopholes, then you have a much more transparent system in terms of wealthier people. You have a debate about wealthy people paying their fair share. I mean, corporations also, right? You have companies like GE that pay no income tax, and I think it was 2010. I think eliminating those loopholes, having a very clear, transparent system is just more efficient, but also, you don't have that problem where I have a better lawyer and I have more money to then devote to eliminating taxes. So, and full-scale reform, I don't think that's something that we've had a lot of debate about. We've had a lot of debate about, should this rate be here, or are the rich paying their fair share, or what percentage of people pay no tax. I think at the end of the day, you want fundamental reform.
Do you think the tax code should be should the tax code have an agenda in terms of incenting certain kinds of behavior?
I do in some instances. I don't in others. So, for example, I'd eliminate mortgage interest deduction. It's difficult how you implement that. I've heard of some other innovative policies in which there are more efficient ways to provide some relief for people who are buying homes because you want to incentivize home buying. I think that's a poor way to do it. At the same time, I'm a fan of a gas tax. I think, if you want to look at our budget and you look at it whole scale in terms of how much we spend on foreign policy, I think a lot of our energy dependence on foreign oil creates costs in terms of our foreign policy, right? So, while I think Iraq was a bad idea, I think we have to pay a lot of attention to that region of the world because it's a volatile region and because it has a lot of influence over, kind of world geopolitics. But because we're so dependent on their oil, we have to pay attention, and that ultimately costs us a lot in resources. So I'd have a gas tax. I understand that's regressive, and obviously lower income individuals pay more. But I think at the end of the day, what you want to do is discourage. You want to discourage via the power of taxes, behavior that increases our dependence on foreign oil. I'd eliminate subsidies. This is kind of a tax thing, but I'd eliminate some of the subsidies for things like corn ethanol, right? Because we're trying to reform energy, but we're not doing it in an efficient way. From what I understand, there are other much more efficient sources of ethanol to use, but because of the government is picking winners and losers, we focus on something that sounds good but isn't really as effective at the end of the day.
All right, so let's shift gears a little bit to the campaign. The recent polling numbers are out, and it's not pretty for you. What are the voters missing about Jamaal?
I think they're yet to really hear the story. So that's part of the reason is me sitting down here with you. I'll continue to kind of hit the ground, shake hands, get to know the voters. I'm in this for the long haul, now till Thursday, but that whole long haul. And so I think at the end of the day, once voters kind of not as much hear my story, but hear my ideas and understand kind of the process about which I go about thinking the ideas. So not just that I want, that I'm in favor of, that I'm a fan of social safety nets, but I want efficient government, but kind of why what my experiences that inform that, or why I feel that way. I think I'll be in a strong position, and so we're just going to continue to hit the ground running. Like I said, we'll release a platform online, answer questions, continue to have discussions on individual policies. Once I think everyone hears kind of official campaign speech, I think we'll have some momentum going into Thursday.
And let's fast forward to hopefully unlikely scenario, but let's say that you're unable to reach out in this short amount of time to people and get the kind of momentum that you're looking for. Would you be willing to suspend your campaign and back someone who you believed in if, say, someone who you were opposed to their ideas were taking a lead in the polls?
Not if I was opposed to their ideas. At the end of the day, I'm a man of principle. I understand. I'm a realist. So if at some point we realize we're just not getting traction, I would absolutely suspend my campaign. But I'm not going to back someone whose ideas I don't believe in because I feel like they're at the front of the polls.
So to sort of divert someone who was winning that you didn't agree with, would you suspend your campaign to go after those people?
Perhaps. I don't like to deal a lot in hypothetical. I feel confident in our campaign. I think we'll gain traction. I think we'll do very well going into Thursday. At the same time, I'm a man of principle. As I look at, across the candidates and I find people that I feel like, in the event I don't win, have strong policies and I think would be strong presidents, I'm willing to back them if I feel like there are people with reckless policies. And I feel like, together maybe another coalition can beat them. I'm open to that also.
If Sarah Edelson was to call you and ask you to be her VP, what would be the response?
I'm in this to be the president. I'm in this to win this. I'm not the type of guy to be a second in command. That's just not in my nature. But I have a lot of respect for Sarah, and I would be willing to have a conversation. But I'm absolutely in this to be president of the United States.
All right. Well, we look forward to the vote.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.